Imagine you were part of a gang that got involved in politics, and you're all corrupt thieves who get government contracts that line your pockets with cash. You get all rich. And then one of the members of the gang becomes president of the United States, and you say, great, now we'll all be really rich. But instead, he has a change of heart and puts all of you in jail. Well, that, my friend, actually did happen, and this president's name was Chester Arthur. Born in Vermont, but was every inch a real New Yorker back in the 1800s. And we're going to be talking about him right now. Chester Arthur was born in 1829. During the Civil War, he became Brigadier General. Then he married a young Ellen Herndon. He adored this woman. They had 3 children, and after 20 years of marriage, sadly, before he became president, she died of pneumonia. He laid flowers at her portrait in the White House every day and never remarried. Big Chester Arthur weighed 270 pounds, but he was not the heaviest president. That was William Howard Taft, who weighed 80 pounds more. Arthur became part of the New York scene, working with gangs, getting contracts and deals. The New York political machine that was run by men such as Roscoe Conkling. And, of course, we have to mention Tammany Hall Big Boss Tweed. It was a glorious time for Chester Arthur. He would go to a lot of parties. He'd be drinking the best wines. And every time something good happened, he'd buy himself a new suit at Brooks Brothers. He'd be drinking and eating at the finest restaurants, and then he got himself a job, a good job. He became the quartermaster at the Custom House. Made him a lot of money. But what happened? Soon afterwards, President Hayes got wind of all of this and fired Chester Arthur. Yet, just 2 years later, Chester Arthur was chosen to be the vice presidential candidate for James Garfield. Nobody expected him to rise after that, but what happened? Of course, you know in my last video, James Garfield got shot. And lingering between life and death, Garfield died. The worst nightmare for all these cabinet members and Garfield's people was that Chester Arthur now became the 21st president of the United States. Most people would be thrilled to live in the White House, but Chester Arthur said, I will not live in that place. He thought it was a dump. He was used to fine living, so he gave the White House a major overhaul, put a lot of funds into it, and it became a visiting spot for dignitaries from around the world, sort of what it is today. Now get this, Chester Arthur was pretty lazy. He would wake up late, he'd, just sleep in late all the time. He'd get up, and then he'd wander into the office around 10 o'clock in the morning. After that, he'd have lunch, and then he would take a nap. And after that, he would go for a walk. Then he'd work a little bit more, close around 4 or 5, and go out with his buddies and have a beer once in a while. Now, immigration was a concern to everybody. Arthur went ahead and made everyone who came into the country pay a tax, and he also restricted immigration. Nobody with mental illnesses, criminal records, or if you were mentally challenged could come in. Everyone else was fine except for the Chinese. Many people felt there were too many Chinese people coming here, working the railroads and all of that, working for very, very low wages, which basically took jobs away from everybody else. Now, they wanted to pass the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned the Chinese from coming in, and what Arthur did was he restricted immigration and denied them citizenship. Believe it or not, this was the policy in the United States between U.S. and China, and it ended in 1943 when the U.S. and China became allies, right before World War II. What can I say? This is a U.S. back then. Around this time, Americans were more lenient, let's just say, towards Native Americans. The Indian Wars had died down, and Chester Arthur wanted to assimilate the Native Americans into U.S. society. He did this by allotting land to them. Individual Indians could buy land, but unfortunately what happened afterwards was that all these Native Americans that were out there away from their tribes as individuals started selling their land to white speculators. So it didn't quite work out. The Supreme Court had overturned the Civil Rights Act. Arthur could not persuade the Congress to do more for the disenfranchised blacks. But he did small acts such as blocking the court-martial of one black man. And basically, that's all he could do due to all the racism that was going around, prevalent. The Mormons, in response to the multiple marriages in Utah with the Church of the Latter-day Saints, Arthur signed the Edmunds Act that was making polygamy a federal crime and barring the polygamists from voting or holding public office. Chester Arthur was successful in rebuilding the U.S. Navy. New ships, cruisers, and monitors were built. He believed in a strong America. Where Arthur was not successful was making good trade deals with Santo Domingo, Hawaii, or Mexico. The big deal were the tariffs. Now, what is a tariff? A tariff is a tax on all products coming into the United States. Foreign goods were more expensive. And you say, great, because it caused people to buy American. But what happened? Instead of keeping the price down, monopolies were built. The rich were getting richer. And of course, this is all because of greed. So, in essence, buy American, good for the American people. No, good for the American fat cats that were on top. Well, Arthur did manage to restrict or reduce the tariff just a bit. Now, what about Chester Arthur's New York buddies, those corrupt people? Well, when Arthur became president, he got a change of heart. He felt the weight of responsibility. And what did he do to these people? Well, he took his old corrupt buddies and he started making investigations, and many of them went to jail. An astonishing turnaround. If Arthur felt that any projects passed through Congress were wasteful or not beneficial, he would veto them. Big example, the River and Harbors Act, a wasteful water project. The American people loved him, but he got a lot of enemies. The most significant thing that Arthur did was get rid of the spoils system. The spoils system was a system where a new president would hire his friends or the people that got him elected to important federal positions. You could buy or bribe your way to a federal job. Arthur did this by signing the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. This is a system that we use today. This meant that in order to get a federal job, you had to have experience, you had to have something, you had to have some kind of a degree, and there was a panel of independent people that would determine that. In other words, you got your job on merit. Chester Arthur, because of kidney problems, only served that one term. But he was an above-average president. Who would have thought of it? Anyway, this is Cool Talk signing off. Send me your comments, or better yet, subscribe.